Hello and welcome to another episode of Christo IT Services Making It Work for You. My name is Ben Hecht, and today I'm joined by Carl Bjerke from Infrascale, one of our partners that we use here at Christo IT. And the reason I brought in Carl today is because backup and disaster recovery solutions have never been a hotter topic, and especially with the crazy world we're living in right now, and these days you have to be far more than using just a USB backup stick or a NAS device or a tape drive to have an effective backup plan. It requires planning, it requires policy development, it requires proper design and implementation, and it needs to be secured properly. So Carl's here today covering the topic of why every business deserves a simple and powerful and scalable backup and disaster recovery solution. Carl, thank you very much for joining us today. Please tell us a little bit about Infrascale and some of the reasons to have a backup and disaster recovery plan, the cold hard truth that you want to let people know about, and the biggest question that they should be asking themselves when planning a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you from behalf of myself and for Infrascale for letting us take part today. I love your series. I actually came across it. I follow you on LinkedIn and just thought what you were doing is great. And so I'm really excited that we get to do this together today.
Thank you.
So before we start talking about why backup and disaster recovery is important, I think the first question that people usually want to answer for themselves is, okay, well, why should I take your opinion, Carl? And I'm a territory account manager for Infrascale. I manage our partner network and our end users basically on the East Coast. And as an organization, there are some really key things that pop out to me on this slide. And the first one is really that there are more than 60,000 companies which are putting their trust and faith in the Infrascale backup solution. Those companies represent more than 250,000 devices of all types, everything from servers on physical infrastructure and virtual infrastructure to laptops, desktops, and even mobile devices and SaaS applications that are generating data. But the real key to me for me on this slide is the amount of data that we protect. And so I did a little bit of research to try and get some sense of scale, something maybe we could see and touch for how much is actually a petabyte. And so here's what I found. We all know that a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes, and a terabyte drive, you buy one for $50, right? But 1 petabyte contains the equivalent of information of about 20 million filing cabinets worth of paper. And in fact, if you were to collect all of the great literary works of mankind in every language and translate them, you would have about 50 petabytes worth of information. And here at Infrascale, we protect 7 times that amount of data for our customers, so 350 petabytes. Yeah, it's a cool number, and it's fun to think about how big those things actually are when we put it into terms that we could potentially see and touch and feel.
Right.
So why do organizations need backup, disaster recovery, business continuity? There's obviously a lot of reasons, and some of them, quite frankly, we hear about quite a bit. So natural disasters, we all watch the news, the hurricanes coming. People always want to prepare for that. But we also need to acknowledge that, quite frankly, the incidence of those things destroying a vast amount of data for any particular organization are pretty small. The things that are far more likely are things like hardware failure, power failure, people like myself making mistakes, right? So human error, software issues. It's unfortunate, but every once in a while there's some theft. And we certainly read and hear a lot about ransomware. I'm sure that's something you guys are getting calls every day. And so within this slide, yes, there are all these different types of things that we need to protect for. But I think what you're not really seeing there explicitly is that within all of the different ways that data can be damaged or destroyed, you need to have flexibility in how you would potentially back up that data and recover it. You don't want to have to implement the same process to recover a single file, for example, that you would for an entire data center if your building were to disappear. And so within our solution stack, that flexibility of recovery is, quite frankly, even more important than the flexibility of backup.
Right.
So that brings us to a slide which, when I present at security conferences, I really just refer to it as the truth, right? And when you're a kid, always tell the truth. The truth doesn't care about your feelings. The truth is the truth, and it's an absolute defense in everything that you say. And so the fact of the matter is, when it comes to backup, recovery, and business continuity, there are actions that you have to take today. And if you don't take them, it is possible that your organization will find itself in a situation where no amount of resources, whether it be gold, money, platinum, hours, uranium, I don't care what you're willing to throw at this problem, you will not be able to recover because the ship has simply sailed. And there's an analogy for it, and I apologize for its nature, but for those of us who have been in a car accident, the seatbelt has saved my life. Okay, the seatbelt is the backup and DR plan. Quite frankly, if I'd been in an accident and I didn't have my seatbelt on, reaching for it afterwards isn't going to help. And so you have to be proactive. You have to take this seriously, and you have to protect yourself, because if you don't do it now, it's possible to find yourself in a situation where it is impossible to recover.
Right. Well said, Carl. So, Carl, what's the single biggest challenge that you see today in backup that you're having, conversations that you're having with people?
Yeah, Ben, that's a really insightful question, and I appreciate you asking it. So I think the first thing to kind of recognize is, look, there's a lot of good backup solutions, right? But the real challenge for most organizations isn't that the solutions that they have in place are bad. It is the complexity that is created by having too many solutions to really solve what is one continuum of problem, right? So within my space, it's possible to have a solution for file and folder backup, another one for mobile devices. Then you have one for your physical infrastructure, your virtual infrastructure. Then you have something that is responsible for replication. You have something that's responsible for encryption. You have another solution that's responsible for testing. And before we start really rolling it out, you've got 9 or 10 different pieces of software that your team is being asked to manage. And it's simply too complex. And so really my core advice to people as they're looking for solutions, and you have a matrix of things that are important to you, somewhere within that, and weighted very, very heavily, needs to be ease of use and simplicity and vendor consolidation, quite frankly.
Good stuff, Carl. Thank you very much. So, what's the question that everybody should be asking themselves?
Yeah. So first, I think we want to recognize that not having a plan is a plan. It's just a terrible one, right? And so the question that I would encourage everybody who's watching this to ask themselves is, number one, recognize that you're doing something today for backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity. It's costing you something. That might be a stack of money, or it might be a lot of time and effort, but there are investments being made. And so the core question you really got to ask yourself is, the investments that I'm making in backup recovery and disaster recovery, am I assured that they're really going to pay off when I need it? And if you can say yes to that question, congratulations, you're doing a great job. If your answer involves such terms like, well, I think it should work, or I hope, or we expect, that really is an opportunity to look a little bit deeper and ultimately work with someone, Ben, like you at Christo, who can help you get to the answer of, I know that this will work.
Awesome. Good stuff, Carl. Really appreciate having you today. So everybody, just so you know, Christo IT and Infrascale. Infrascale is Christo's go-to partner for when it comes to backup and disaster recovery solution, and Carl is clearly a master of his trade. So when this discussion comes up at your business, please plan appropriately. Please plan for the worst and expect the best from your backup and disaster recovery vendor. Please call me. Please call Carl if you need anything. My name is Ben Hecht, joined by Carl Bjerke from Infrascale. With another episode of Christo IT, making it work for you. Thank you very much for joining us, Carl, and thank you all for
Thank
watching.
you. Appreciate the time.